Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Caregiver Considerations. My name is Lucy Gerland, and I'm a caregiver specialist with the Fairfax Area Agency on Aging. You should have received an email this morning with the speaker's slides, so you will have them for reference in the future. It is not necessary for you to have those open during the presentation. You can ask a question at any time by typing it into the question box on your panel. Today's presentation is being recorded, and the recording will be sent to all registrants by early next week. Additionally, there will be a brief survey as you sign out. Please help us by giving us your thoughts. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Kristen Martin. Kristen is a certified case manager, and she is one of the lead case managers with ElderLink. It's a partnership with Fairfax County and Inova Hospital. She's been serving older adults and their loved ones for over 10 years. Kristen has worked primarily with the Respite Care Program, and she is also a co-facilitator for a caregiver education and support program called Caring for You, Caring for Me. So that's officially about Kristen. But what else is evident about Kristen, and I've worked with her for many years, is how deeply she cares and how intuitive she is about helping people with their specific situations. So she definitely has a lot to share with us today, and I know you will enjoy her. And now, Kristen, it's time for you.
Thank you, Lucy. You made me blush and smile at the same time, so thank you very much for that intro. So as Lucy shared, my name is Kristen Martin, and I'm a case manager with ElderLink, which is part of a public-private partnership with the Fairfax Area Agency on Aging and Inova Health System. And our mission at ElderLink is twofold. The first is to support the safety and independence of older adults living in their own home. And the second is to support family caregivers in their caregiving role. So through the nature of my work, I am working with caregivers on a regular basis. And through that professional experience, as well as through my own personal family experiences, I've certainly come to appreciate a caregiver's role. As I've been with ElderLink for several years, I've worked with families who have been in varying stages of their caregiving journey. And each family that I encounter is unique in terms of dynamics, personalities, culture, and values. And it's been very interesting for me to observe along the way that a caregiving option that works very well for one family will not have the same desired result with the next family. So although there are certain similarities with situations and experiences that caregivers may face in their journey, this truly is an individualized experience. Every family comes with their own set of baggage with different trials and issues. Caregiving is not an exact science, and although there is no cookie cutter approach or magical formula to caregiving that will work well for everyone, there are certain steps that can be taken to help properly assist and care for your loved one. So our goal for today is to share information and strategies that will help you manage your important caregiving role. We'll discuss creating an information central of important information. We'll talk about red flags that may indicate that help is needed, as well as helpful communication strategies and the necessity of caring for the caregiver. So I'm going to start off with a trivia question. Who said there are only 4 kinds of people in this world? Those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. So
That's such a great quote. And if you want to answer, just type your answer into the questions panel there.
Oh.
That's right.
All right, so I'll hold on a second to tell you who it is, just in case anyone guesses it.
Yes, somebody got it. Go ahead.
Former First Lady Rosalind Carter.
Yeah.
Right, gold star to you. So that sentiment clearly paints the picture that in one capacity or another, all of us will be touched by caregiving at some point in our lives. So the good news is that if you're tuning into this webinar, you're most likely either already identifying yourself as a caregiver, or you are anticipating that moment in the future when you will be taking on this role. Accepting that title of caregiver is an important distinction to make because all too often people may not readily identify as a caregiver. They may view the tasks that they are helping their loved one with, so maybe providing transportation to doctor appointments, offering companionship and emotional support, helping to manage financial affairs, assisting with the grocery shopping, providing help with personal care needs. So essentially, being an advocate for your loved one on many different levels, as just being part of the role you play within that given relationship, whether it be as a spouse, a partner, an adult child, a friend, or a neighbor. And it's so important to identify as a caregiver so you feel comfortable accessing potential resources that may be available to provide you with support on this caregiving journey. So the why of how we earn this title of caregiver varies. For some of us, it was a conscious and deliberate choice to become caregiver. So just part of an ongoing relationship with our loved one. And for others, maybe we assumed this role because there wasn't anyone else to provide care, or maybe we were identified by others as a primary caregiver. Even more impactful, though, is how we were introduced into the world of caregiving, which can vary drastically. So for some of us, it may be a very gradual introduction to the caregiving journey. Maybe your loved one is experiencing some age-related changes and you are stepping in to provide help in those areas where assistance is needed. Or maybe your loved one has been diagnosed with a certain illness and the nature of the progression of that condition gives you the opportunity to ease into your caregiving role. The duties really don't impact you too much in the beginning, but gradually increase over time to potentially being needed 24/7. Or maybe this caregiving role came out of left field and you did not anticipate that certain health situations or other circumstances would occur to suddenly and unexpectedly put you in this caregiver role. Whatever the extenuating circumstances that created the situation for your loved one needing a caregiver, you and your loved one are on a unique journey together. And as I mentioned, each family has its own unique culture, and each person in that family has their own set of unique values, ideals, and preferences. Caregiving is by no means a one size fits all approach to managing care. However, although each of us as caregivers are on our own unique path, there are certain elements that can help make this caregiving journey feel less daunting, particularly if you are just starting out and you see a very long road before you. So, an important element in helping you and your loved one plan for the future is accumulating and organizing information that pertains to personal issues and financial affairs. Organization is the key. Information that is accurate and readily available will help you understand the issues and will help to set you up for success in the event that you need to get your hands on certain information quickly. In addition, the process of actually collecting and reviewing that information is often a helpful vehicle for discussing issues, as well as identifying steps that need to be taken or plans that need to be updated. So, what are some of the items that should be included in the Smart Book Binder? Personal information should include vital records such as the birth certificate, marriage license, citizenship papers, divorce papers, maybe a death certificate if a spouse has passed away, a copy of the Social Security card, driver's license, military records. In regards to finances, it is helpful to be aware of your loved one's income sources. So this may include Social Security, pension, disability income, VA benefits, etc. And you want to know the gross amounts of each. You also want to be aware of the financial assets, such as bank accounts, retirement funds, life insurance policies, real estate, investment. You'll need to be aware of the name of the institution and the account or policy numbers. It's also helpful to be aware of the financial liabilities, so expenses like mortgages, personal loans, credit cards, and medical bills. Now, understandably, people can be very private when it comes to their finances. Being knowledgeable about this information, though, is helpful in determining the means available to pay for the care and assistance that may be needed. Based on the financials, is there any government help or grants available to help pay for care, or is it strictly a private pay situation? If it is private pay, how long do you think those resources may last before other options need to be explored? When it comes to medical issues, the successful management of a chronic illness is one of the keys to continued good health. And since there's usually a lot of on-the-job training that comes along with caregiving, it can be very anxiety producing at times due to fear of the unknown. And I would encourage you to become informed and learn about the health condition of your loved one. So information can help you understand what's going on, anticipate the course of illness, and assist in the disease management. So for example, what are the typical symptoms and effects of this condition? What's the recommended treatment and prognosis for the future? Having this information helps you to make informed decisions, and it puts you in the position of being proactive rather than reactive. Being proactive puts you more in control of the situation as you're better able to plan and anticipate. And going along with that, if you are going to be involved in your loved one's medical care, make sure you have written permission to speak with your loved one's physicians. You also need to keep an updated list of your loved one's medication, both prescription and over the counter, to include the dosages and purpose for taking the medication. Contact details of the preferred pharmacy is also helpful to have on hand, as well as copies of the insurance cards. Advanced medical directives are important decisions that need to be discussed. And there are two types of decisions to make about your health care in an advanced directive. The first type of decision tells people how to care for you if you ever have a terminal condition and you are not able to make decisions for yourself. This document is called a living will, and it deals with life prolonging procedures like artificial nutrition and hydration or a breathing machine. It does not include treatments needed to make you comfortable or to ease pain. The second type of advanced directive is the medical power of attorney. And this is when you name a trusted person to make treatment decisions for you, to accept or refuse medical care if you are unable to make these decisions for yourself. There's another important medical form called POLST, P-O-L-S-T, which stands for Physician's Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And this is actually a medical directive. So POLST is a physician's order that gives people who have a life-threatening illness the ability to decide with their doctors what treatments they want or do not want. And the difference between the POLST and a DNR, or do not resuscitate, is that the POLST is able to give more information to emergency personnel. So it can state if a person wants full treatment, take me to the hospital and consider all treatment options, or limited interventions. So I'm okay with basic medical treatments, but I don't want the level of interventions that would make me go to ICU, or if they only want comfort measures. So make me comfortable where I am because I do not want to go to the hospital. Again, the POLST is not for everyone. It's really intended for people who are in a very fragile state and who are having discussions about end-of-life care. And the POLST allows for that person to specifically state what treatments they want and to what level they want those treatments. So legally, the important documentation will be the power of attorney. And ideally, that's a durable power of attorney. A power of attorney is a document that is used to appoint a trusted person to make legal and financial decisions on your behalf. And the difference between a general power of attorney and a durable power of attorney is that a durable power of attorney continues to be in effect even if the person who created the document is no longer considered mentally competent at some point in the future. If there is no durable power of attorney and a person loses the ability or capacity to make informed decisions, then guardianship must be petitioned through a legal proceeding. Other important information to have on hand would be the contact details of close friends and neighbors. So people who might be able to temporarily step in if there was an emergency and you are not immediately available. That brings to the table another important consideration though. So what would happen if you are not able to provide care for your loved one, either for an extended period of time or permanently? Are there other family members who might be willing and able to provide care? Are there enough financial resources to pay for care either in the home or to pay for the transition into a facility if that proved to be the safest plan of care? These can be really uncomfortable discussions to have, and you certainly don't want to anticipate the worst, but if you know what hits the fan, what alternative arrangements have you discussed? Your mind will be in a much better position to process options when you're able to look at the situation calmly, logically, and rationally. So once you've gathered all the necessary information, think about organizing the paperwork into a master binder or file, or whatever filing and organization system that makes sense for you. It's probably going to take some considerable time and effort to get all that paperwork organized, so go ahead and work on gathering the essentials first. While the idea of creating an information central is a very helpful tool for caregivers to possess, depending on the situation, loved ones are sometimes reluctant to share their personal information. So offer reassurance to your loved one that you're not trying to invade their personal life. You're only trying to assemble the pertinent information that would enable you to best help them in the event that help was needed. If for whatever reason your loved one could not actively provide the necessary information that is being requested, you could step in to do so. If your loved one is still uncomfortable, see if they might be willing to share this information with an attorney or tell you where this important information is kept in the event that there is some type of emergency situation. So when the need for help is not as obvious as being directly asked, or the result of a crisis when it is very clear that help is needed, a good first step is to assess the situation. For many of us, it may feel really uncomfortable and a bit intrusive if we feel like we are overstepping boundaries. So it helps to be aware of certain signals that may make you feel more justified becoming involved. You want to identify the areas that your loved one is doing all right managing on their own, and all right is a relative term, and then what are the areas where your loved one may benefit from assistance. You're looking for clues that indicate a deviation or a change to how things are normally done. And I think it's important to note that what may seem like chaos in one household may be the everyday norm in another. So again, the key is change that you may be observing from the everyday routine. Changes in your loved one's ability to handle their activities of daily living, or ADLs, and instrumental activities of daily living, or IADLs, may be an indication that help is needed. So ADLs, which are personal care needs that are necessary to caring for yourself and maintaining independence, include activities like bathing, dressing, toileting, ambulating, transferring, and eating. So some things to consider: are you noticing any changes in your loved one's personal appearance? Is your loved one looking unkempt? So maybe disheveled or dirty clothing, messy hair, or scruffy facial hair that's not the norm, longer fingernails that might be trapping dirt and grime. And very bluntly, are you noticing any odors when you come into close contact with your loved one that may indicate some issues in the bathroom, either with the toileting process or with the showering and bathing? Getting into and out of the tub to bathe may be a very anxiety producing task because of the fear of falling. Does your loved one have a difficult time getting up and down from a seated position or getting into or out of bed? Is your loved one bracing himself on furniture or along the walls in the house as they walk? So just some things, some clues to be aware of. IADLs are the instrumental activities of daily living, and these are related to independent living. So these tasks include activities like housekeeping, laundry, bill paying, yard maintenance, and grocery shopping. So some areas that you might want to observe: is there sufficient food in the fridge and cupboards? If there is food, take a look at the expiration dates. Are you noticing any burnt pots and pans, any unwiped spills in the kitchen? To your knowledge, are bills being paid on time? Is there a growing stack of unopened mail? Unpaid bills or past due notices could be an indication that your loved one is having some trouble handling the finances. So that concentration needed to work with numbers and to keep track of the monthly bills may be compromised. Another consideration is your loved one still able to do their own laundry. In many homes, the washer and dryer are located in the basement, and carrying a laundry basket up and down the stairs can be a scary scenario for some. Take a look at the living areas. Are things piling up, creating areas of clutter? A dirty or disorganized home, if not the norm, may indicate that your loved one is physically having trouble completing household tasks. So that ability to bend, to turn, to reach, to push may physically be a challenge now. Other causes could be poor vision. Maybe your loved one cannot actually see the cobwebs in the corner or the crumbs on the floor. Or it could be a sign of dementia. Your loved one is having trouble completing daily tasks. It might be cognitively challenging to follow through with all of the necessary steps of basic housekeeping duties. If there's a pet in the home, is the pup getting the attention she needs with potty breaks and meals? Any concerns about your loved one taking medications appropriately as prescribed? Again, I want to mention with all the keen observations you're trying to make, you really want to pay attention to changes, deviations from the norm in regards to how things once were. And two key questions to consider: is the home environment safe? And is it safe for your loved one to be home alone? We certainly want to make sure that there are no major issues with the plumbing, the appliances, or any structural issues in the home. And you also want to make sure that there are working smoke alarms. Just a quick side note, Fairfax County will provide and install battery-powered smoke alarms free of charge to Fairfax County residents. You just need to contact the local Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department station. So sometimes there are easy fixes for home safety concerns, like the installation of grab bars and a shower transfer bench in the bathroom, an automatic chair lift, a stair lift, ramp, walk-in shower with a shower chair and handheld shower, a bed rail, personal emergency response system, and a medication management system. An occupational therapist can be a very useful resource to help make safety recommendations in the home regarding the different types of assistive or adaptive equipment that may be available. And although these devices, assistive devices, can make a big difference towards supporting the safety and independence of your loved one at home, they do not meet the need if your loved one is requiring supervision in the home. So concerning the safety of your loved one being home alone, would your loved one know what to do in the event of an emergency? If the answer is, I would call for help, ask specifically who and what number. If your loved one is still driving, are you noticing any scrapes or dents on the car? Are the tags and inspection stickers up to date? If you do have an opportunity to drive together, watch out for any signs of impaired driving, maybe difficulty staying in the lane, slower reaction time, tailgating, driving too fast or too slow, or even confusion over the brake and gas pedals. Concerns about driving are often one of the most difficult conversations that family members can have because driving is such an important symbol of independence. So let's say you're seeing some red flags that are causing concern. Maybe changes in appearance, loss of physical ability, impaired cognition, trouble keeping up with home maintenance. Whatever the issue may be, how do you approach these concerns? So the goal is open and honest communication that sets a tone for discussion. A loving, caring approach will move a discussion further than a "this is what's best for you" attitude, which typically puts the receiving party on the defensive. You want to try to use I messages that express how you feel and not how the other person makes you feel. So for example, if you say honey, and just to note, I'm using the name honey as a term of affection to describe whomever your loved one may be. So honey, we're going to find a person to come in here 3 days a week to give you a shower. Well, I'm betting that honey's response is not going to be an enthusiastic thumbs up. It may be very true that honey could benefit from some help, but you need to find a way to speak from your own personal feelings and perceptions while still identifying the concern and its effect on you. The underlying message that needs to be communicated during the course of the conversation is that feeling of caring. Keep in mind that although the main objective may be addressing the red flags that you have observed, there needs to be an emphasis on identifying the remaining strengths that your loved one still retains and understanding what values are most important to your loved one. It's also important to refrain from making assumptions, which can easily lead to feelings of resentment or arguments. You might assume what your loved one really needs and what is best for them, which may keep you from making the effort to actually learn and understand what is really important to your loved one. Likewise, your loved one might assume they know everything about you and your motivations, which may be a roadblock to actually listening and understanding what you are trying to communicate. Ideally, you're trying to maintain or even establish a cooperative relationship with your loved one. You are sharing a commitment to collaboration, so working together to develop goals, to solve problems, and to make decisions that are in the best interest of everyone involved. Part of nurturing that cooperative relationship includes perspective taking, so you can truly understand the position other people are taking by learning more about what makes them tick. So why are you feeling or behaving in that particular way? And it's important to note that just because you are taking the time to learn why a person is invested in a certain course of action, that does not mean that you are giving up your own position. You are seeking to understand why there is such value or importance being placed upon a certain course of action. The other half of this puzzle for successful communication is being able to actively listen and empathize. So keep in mind that your loved one is experiencing change and loss, and admitting that help is actually needed may feel like a threat to independence. And as a result, it is very understandable that your loved one might experience a whole range of different emotions. Anger, fear, frustration, sadness, helplessness. I heard an analogy a while back that's really stuck with me. So try thinking of emotions like a beach ball, and now imagine trying to hold that beach ball underwater. So with some effort, you can keep that beach ball submerged for a bit of time, but the longer you try to keep that beach ball suppressed under the water, the greater the explosion will be once it finally comes to the surface. The point being, you need to give your loved ones space and understanding to deal with any of the difficult emotions they might be experiencing. Having someone who is willing to understand and listen, and a little reflective listening goes a long way, may make it easier for your loved one to talk openly about their feelings and concerns, so you are able to learn what is most important to them. With reflective listening, you are hearing to understand your loved one, and it helps to serve two purposes. One, that you are actually understanding what your loved one is saying, and two, it allows your loved one to feel that he or she is being heard. It may be difficult, but with reflective listening, you are not sharing your 2 cents, but you are truly focusing on your loved one's concerns. You're echoing back the concerns of your loved one that they've shared with you in your own words. So, as an example, let's say your loved one says to you, I can't drive at night anymore. I can't work in the yard like I used to. And now you're telling me I need someone to come in here and give me a shower? Just leave me alone. I'm not asking for any help. All right, so it might be really tempting at this point to fire back reasons why you think that someone needs to come in and help your loved one take a shower. But instead, try to echo back what you feel your loved one is trying to tell you. So maybe your response goes something like this. You've always been an independent person. It must be really upsetting not to be able to do all the things you want to do, and frustrating to have someone else tell you what you need, period. And hopefully that bit of reflective listening might allow for some productive dialogue to occur. If caregiving is going to be a family affair, speak with your loved one and the involved family members to determine who is going to be responsible for what. You need to be honest about your strengths and figure out the different skill sets in the family that can best complement one another. Again, you want to try to strive for that cooperative type of relationship. So, who in the family is the best communicator, keeping people up to date? Who's the best researcher? Who's the most comfortable speaking to medical personnel? Is there a number of persons in the family who doesn't mind paying the bills and keeping track of the financials? Be realistic with yourself in terms of your limits and capability, as well as with other family members involved. And after decisions have been made, keep in mind that responsibilities may need to be tweaked to reflect changes in the caregiving situation or with the caregiving team. Ideally, you want to schedule regular family meetings in order to keep everyone up to speed and to support an atmosphere of a cooperative relationship, which is best maintained through frequent contact together. Regular meetings also help to take pressure off those involved, since not everything needs to be decided all at once. Breaking those big discussions or decisions into more manageable steps, so baby steps, that allows folks time to process. Going along with that, creating an agenda is also a helpful tool to keep the conversation on track to the specific topics this meeting is intended to address. And if folks don't live nearby, or if there are other logistical issues that may make it difficult for everyone to meet face to face, use technology to your advantage. So options like conference calls, FaceTime, speakerphone, may help to overcome some of these barriers. If decisions need to be made, involve your loved one in the decision-making process. With the different losses that your loved one may be experiencing, feeling in control of one's life is so important. And that's why it's also so important to highlight your loved one's strengths and abilities during the conversation as well. By involving your loved one in the decision-making process, you are trying to plan with, not for, your loved one, involving them in discussions to the extent that he or she is capable. Shared decisions usually produce the best results because you have the buy-in from the parties involved. However, regardless of the issue or your way of approaching the subject, your first attempt at the conversation may not bring about the desired result you were hoping for. So in this case, step back and approach the subject in another way at another time. Allowing your loved one time to adjust to the seriousness of your concern is important, and be realistic that it will most likely take more than one conversation to sort things out. Only if your loved one is lacking mental capacity and or there's evidence that lives are being endangered should you question your loved one's ability to make decisions. It's important not to assume that a person is mentally incompetent just because he seems eccentric or she refuses to do what you think is best. Mental competency needs to be assessed by professionals, and in these situations, preventive action needs to be taken. So when taking steps to address an issue, it's best to have a plan before beginning the conversation with your loved one. And part of the process of coming up with a plan is to first define the problem. And the goal here is to be specific and state the problem in a solvable, action-oriented form. And in order to do this, you want to look at the situation with an open mind. The real problem may not be what first comes to mind, and you want to make sure that you are identifying that real problem and not just the symptoms. So let's say your loved one is losing weight. That weight loss is really a symptom of the actual problem. You need to determine the cause of the weight loss. Is it due to a physical change, a medical condition, maybe loneliness? So let's say you do a little bit of background work and you learn that a medical condition is causing a physical change. So let's say neuropathy in the feet, making it really difficult for your loved one to stand in the kitchen long enough to make a proper meal. And this is contributing to the weight loss your loved one is experiencing. So the next step is to do a brainstorm to identify and list alternative solutions to the problem that has been identified. And during the brainstorm, you want a free flow of ideas. So there's no evaluating or censoring ideas as they come to mind. Your goal is to be creative and to list as many ideas as possible. So using our example problem of your loved one not being able to stand long enough in the kitchen to make meals, what are some possible solutions? Maybe hire a chef, set up Meals on Wheels, buy microwave dinners, drink Carnation instant breakfast, drink Boost, order taken, go through the drive-through, ask family members or friends to bring in meals, buy a stool for your loved one to sit on, etc. So after you get all of the ideas out from that brainstorm, it's time to go in and evaluate the options and choose a course of actions. And this is a time to take a look at those free-flowing ideas with a bit more of a discerning eye. You want to reduce the list of options by omitting those which are clearly not feasible or that may violate any legal, ethical, or value concerns. After you've done that, you want to evaluate the usefulness of each of the remaining options, considering both the positive and negative outcomes of each. Then you go ahead and you select the option that appears to be the most feasible or that you think will have the best likely outcome. So considering the options from your brainstorm, you and your loved one decide that Meals on Wheels is the best possible solution, and that gets the green light. At this point, you go ahead and you take action and implement the solution. And in order to do this, you need to map out a strategy by developing a step-by-step plan. So it's breaking things into more manageable steps. It's important to note that if you are involving other family members or members of your support network, part of the strategy is determining who will be responsible for each of the necessary tasks and making sure that everyone agrees to accept his or her responsibility. You need to make sure that you have that buy-in from the other folks involved. And although the concept of sharing the responsibility is ideal in a family situation, if you don't have that commitment and buy-in, you are going to find yourself in a very frustrated position when there's no follow-through with what was originally agreed to. So now it's time to actually carry out the assigned tasks while maintaining frequent contact and keeping others in the loop. All right, so the decision was made to move forward with Meals on Wheels. What's the strategy plan? That might include deciding who's going to call the Area Agency on Aging to find out a little bit more detail regarding the program, setting up the assessment, and any other steps that may be necessary. Finally, you test and adjust the solution. So if your loved one agrees to a certain service or type of assistance, don't delay in getting things started and be dependable and consistent. Once the solution is in place, see how things go and if the plan is accomplishing its intended goal. Talk to your loved one to check in to see how things are going, and you need to be open to feedback from all of those who are involved about the success or lack of intended success. And as new information comes to light, carefully consider that info and make adjustments as needed. Keep in mind that problem solving is certainly not a one and done type of scenario. It needs to be viewed as an ongoing or a cyclical process. So try to remain flexible and be prepared to try alternative solutions or even return to the beginning of the problem solving process if things are not going according to plan. So let's say your loved one started with Meals on Wheels. They tried it for a month, but really did not like the food. Okay, this is the time to think back to the brainstorm and select another possible solution to test out. Whatever the issue may be, the goal is to create a caregiving plan based on the needs and wishes of the person who will be receiving the care. And maintenance of a lifestyle that suits the individual is key to well-being in later life. It can sometimes be a challenge to help a loved one maintain their independence, but with information about resources and services to fit their needs, you will hopefully have the satisfaction of knowing that you are doing the best you can to be supportive of your loved one's values and preference. So, very generally speaking now, you've identified that help is needed. You may or may not know specifically what type of help is needed, but you know that some sort of assistance or support is needed to improve the situation. What is a good first step to finding out what these possible options may be? So the Area Agency on Aging, local to where your loved one resides, is a great first step to learn about programs and services that may be available to support you and your loved one. Just to share a little bit of background history, area agencies on aging are part of the Older Americans Act, and these agencies were created with the intention of being the local organization mandated to help older adults continue to reside in the community. And they aim to accomplish this by offering supportive services to help individuals remain as safely and as independently as possible within their own homes. So in Fairfax County, our Aging, Disability, and Caregiver Resource Line, 703-324-7948, is the best foot in the door to learn about different supportive services that may be available within the county. Home-based care services such as assistance with bathing, help with laundry and light housekeeping, maybe respite services to provide relief to the caregiver are all income-based, while other services like Meals on Wheels and volunteer services have no income qualifications. Depending on the need and whether or not your loved one may or may not financially or functionally qualify for services, our ADCR team can help direct you to other options that may be available for assistance. My organization, ElderLink, is another option for caregivers to learn about potential services. And as I shared, part of our mission is to help support family caregivers in their caregiving role. And I've heard from many caregivers that Fairfax County is a great place to grow older, but it can be really confusing knowing what services may be out there or even how to access those services. So we offer a service called Caregiver Consultations, which is a 1-hour consult that can be done either over the phone or scheduled in the office. And it's an opportunity to talk about the caregiving situation at hand, and we can provide some helpful feedback and resource information. These consults are provided free of charge and can be requested by calling our ElderLink intake line at 703-324-5374. Depending where in the country your loved one lives, the Area Agency on Aging may have a different name, and the core services and eligibility requirements may vary as well. So to find the local Office of Aging outside of Fairfax County, but still in Virginia, Senior Navigator is a nonprofit organization that aims to provide helpful free resource information related to topics of aging, disability, overall well-being, and veterans. And then for services nationwide, Elder Care Locator, which is a public service of the Administration on Aging, and it aims to help connect older adults and their families to services, would be the search tool to use. All right, so what to do if you come up with some good potential solutions to meet the problem at hand. You've practiced good communication techniques, but your loved one says, no, absolutely not. What do you do now? So you may need to pick your battles. Often as caregivers, we be very focused on the quantity of our loved one's life, wanting to protect them and make them well, whereas our loved one is more concerned about the quality of life. And overestimating a loved one's needs can be destructive to you both and can contribute to your loved one feeling depressed and angry or even growing more dependent if you take responsibility for functions they can still perform, even if done with difficulty. It's not an easy realization, but unless there is concern in regard to your loved one's mental capacity, we have to respect our loved one's right to make a decision, even if it's a bad one. Capacity and competency are terms that are often used interchangeably, but they mean two different things. So capacity is an individual's ability to make an informed decision. So the person has the ability to understand the nature and effects of their acts. And a licensed physician is able to make a determination regarding capacity. A person is considered incapacitated when he or she is impaired by certain mental, intellectual, or physical challenges to the extent that the person lacks sufficient understanding to make, communicate, or carry out reasonable decisions regarding his or her well-being. Competency refers to the degree of mental soundness necessary to make decisions, and it's a legal state, not a medical one. And unless determined by a court of law, all adults are presumed competent. And I know this is difficult to accept, as many caregivers are then left to clean up the broken pieces when their loved one's poor decision making leads to undesirable consequences. As we mentioned earlier, if there truly is a concern regarding the capacity of your loved one, preventive action needs to be taken. And in these situations, Adult Protective Services can be a very helpful resource. Adult Protective Services protects older adults and incapacitated adults from abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And the goal is to help these vulnerable adults to live in their own home as long as possible, to become as self-sufficient as possible, and to help find appropriate placements only when necessary. The philosophy of APS is to provide the least restrictive intervention necessary to protect the older adult and to stabilize the situation. So if you're having concerns that your loved one is putting themselves at risk by certain decisions that are being made, and there's question to whether or not your loved one fully understands the ramification of these decisions, a report can be filed with APS. And for your peace of mind, the contact information of the person making the report is kept strictly confidential. APS can then go in to assess the situation and, if needed, help with any of the next steps that may be necessary if there is question regarding the ability to make informed decisions. So for those of you who have been on this caregiver journey for a while, there's often a tendency to become super focused on the needs of your loved one, and you put yourself in the back burner. By doing this, you can become neglectful of your own needs and maybe not care for yourself as well as you could be, which can contribute to feelings of stress and also cause problems with your own emotional, mental, and physical health. Caring for yourself is absolutely fundamentally necessary in order to be an effective and healthy caregiver for your loved one. If you think of yourself as a bucket of water and you keep doling yourself out, pretty soon you're going to be scraping that bottom if you don't find a way to refresh and replenish yourself. And this is going to look a little different for everyone, figuring out what really recharges you. The American Medical Association publishes the Caregiver Self-Assessment Survey, and the purpose of this tool is to help you identify if you might be experiencing a high degree of distress in helping to care for your loved one. This self-assessment provides you the opportunity to assess how you are doing. We often neglect to ask how our caregivers are doing and may take for granted what sacrifices are being made in order for that caregiver to assume that role. So if you're feeling burnt out, this tool can help get that dialogue going with members of your support system or your doctor. Let's see. I wanted to try a little visualization exercise, but I think for the sake of time, I'm going to skip it. So so I'm sorry about that. But the point of the exercise was for you to identify ways for you to recharge yourself. So just the very quick gist of it, you make plans for people to come over. So you clean the house, you get everything ready, and then your friends decide they cannot come, but instead they're inviting everyone to their home, including the loved one who you're caring for. So you have a few hours all to yourself. And the idea is, all right, I have 6 hours of peace and quiet. What do I want to do with that time? And it's to identify different ways that you may recharge yourself. Um, this is a very neat visualization that was shared with me recently, and I wanted to share it with you in case you may have a difficult time figuring out ways to recharge yourself. So this is a self-care wheel, and it was created by a person named Olga Phoenix, who is a trauma prevention expert. And she initially created this wheel to help herself lead a more balanced life, and then began using it with her trauma patients. And the wheel is made of 6 dimensions. So we have psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, professional, and physical. And each of these dimensions represents areas of our life that need daily attention. And as you can see here, there are a range of different activities that you can do to help ensure that each area is receiving the nourishment it needs and deserves. So even if you are doing a good job caring for yourself, caregiving still brings out a wide variety of emotions. So it's a range of emotions, both positive and negative. And the reality of caregiving is that it does create stresses and strains and those anxiety-filled moments. And more than likely, you'll experience a whole range of negative emotions. Some of these emotions might be evident right away, and some of these emotions may take a little while to come to the surface. The important thing to recognize is that all of the emotions that you feel are valid. You need to let yourself deal with the emotion that you are experiencing and listen to what your emotions are trying to tell you. So angry, resentful, sad, scared, anxious, depressed, overwhelmed, guilty. These are just some of the very common feelings that most caregivers experience at some point in their caregiving journey. And it's important to deal with these emotions because they make us feel bad. They lower our energy and they hurt our self-esteem. So what can you do to cope with some of these negative emotions? Again, the first thing we need to do is recognize and acknowledge these negative emotions. So think back to that beach ball analogy, trying to keep things suppressed. We may feel bad about having some of these feelings towards our caregiving situation, but we're not robots. These are all very common human reactions. And we need to take the responsibility for our emotions and do some self-reflection to identify the source of our negative emotions. So what is that trigger that's making you feel resentful? What's making you feel guilty or sad or lonely? Once you've had a chance to reflect and do some honest soul searching, it's important to express your emotions so others know how difficult things may be for you in the moment, and ways can be explored how to best support you. If you are experiencing excessive stress, which may manifest itself through feelings of depression, maybe physical fatigue, sleep issues, withdrawal, talk to your doctor. Talk to family and friends who may not necessarily be able to fix things for you, but who are at least there to listen. Connect with a support group of people who understand what you may be feeling and experiencing. And support groups do just that. They help to bring people together who are facing a similar experience. Through the connections that are being made in a support group, caregivers are provided the opportunity to share personal experiences and feelings, as well as different coping strategies. Even more important than that, these folks can help to give you the encouragement and comfort that you need, in addition to that sharing of advice. That being said, overcoming these negative emotions is not a one and done type of achievement. They will most likely creep back in, and you need to figure out how you can best cope with these emotions when they do return. And in order to best cope, you need to develop a battery of different coping skills that you can apply as a situation calls for it. So stress management, exercising, knowing and setting your limits, making time for fun, time management, creating a daily to-do list, delegating, determining your must-dos and what would be nice to do. Decision making, so defining and clarifying the issue, creating a plan of action, problem solving. So you've been solving problems your whole life, but as caregivers, you're encountering new problems. And working through that problem solving model that we did a bit earlier helps you put pen to paper and maybe think a little bit more systematically through an issue that you may be facing. And then lifestyle management. So making sure you're seeing the doctor regularly, getting enough sleep, eating appropriate healthy foods, and changing our perspective by learning to see the humor in situations. So many benefits to humor. But by finding ways to address your emotional needs as caregiver, you're going to be a better caregiver. So I wanted to share with you the Caregiver Bill of Rights. And in case you have not seen it before, I hope it's something that really resonates with you. So the Caregiver Bill of Rights was written by a woman named Jo Horn in her book Caregiving, Helping an Aging Loved One, which was written back in 1985. And as we quickly go through the list, I want you to assess if you're exercising any of these rights now. And if you're not, maybe identify one or two that you'd like to start with. So I have the right to take care of myself. This is not an act of selfishness. It will give me the capability of taking better care of my loved one. I have the right to seek help from others, even though my loved one may object. I recognize the limits of my own endurance and strength. I have the right to maintain facets of my own life that do not include the person I care for, just as I would if he or she were healthy. I know that I do everything that I reasonably can for this person, and I have the right to do some things just for myself. I have the right to get angry, be depressed, and express other difficult emotions occasionally. I have the right to reject any attempts by my loved one, either conscious or unconscious, to manipulate me through guilt and/or depression. I have the right to receive consideration, affection, forgiveness, and acceptance for what I do for my loved ones for as long as I offer these qualities in return. I have the right to take pride in what I am accomplishing and to applaud the courage it has sometimes taken to meet the needs of my loved one. I have the right to protect my individuality and my right to make a life for myself that will sustain me in the time when my loved one no longer needs my full-time help. And I have the right to expect and demand that as new strides are made in finding resources to aid physically and mentally impaired persons in our country, similar strides will be made towards aiding and supporting caregivers. So caregivers assume a very challenging role, but hopefully it's a role that will provide you with some very precious moments as well. And for caregivers who have completed their journey, many share that although it may be difficult to identify in the moment when you're in the throes of it, caregiving was one of the most gratifying experiences of their life. Caregiving has the ability to change your perspective on life, and you should never underestimate the difference you're making, even if your efforts appear to go unappreciated at times. So our take-home message, whether you're just starting out on your caregiving journey or well on your way, organizing important information, although a tedious task, is a very beneficial one. And it can help you plan for the future as well as being that helpful vehicle for starting the conversations with your loved one to understand what is truly important to them. In terms of knowing when it might be a good time to have some of these more difficult conversations about your loved one's well-being, you need to assess for changes and look for deviations from the norm. So changes from how things were once done normally. While it may be very clear that your loved one is experiencing some losses in ability, it's very important that you also take the time to acknowledge those remaining strengths and abilities. And this helps to provide that needed encouragement to your loved one, who very well may be experiencing a wide range of difficult emotions, given some of the challenges that they're facing. Utilize those good communication techniques when you're having these conversations together, and go ahead and remain flexible in your approach. In order to best know your options, talk things through with your loved one to truly understand their wants and preferences. Figure out what are the potential options to meet the needs that have been identified. So again, the local area agency on aging or members of a support group are great places to get a good grasp on the help that may be available. And once a potential solution is in place, make sure you are monitoring to see how well it's meeting the need. And again, have that flexibility to readjust as needed. Most importantly, that need for self-care is absolutely fundamentally necessary. By caring for yourself, you'll be able to better care for your loved one. You are a priority. Never lose sight of that. Okay, so I'm sorry we got a little rushed to the end. Lucy, I'm not sure if there are any questions, but if there's anything we don't get to, I'm more than happy to email back and forth with folks just so everyone has their questions answered.
Okay. Oh, that was a lot of really great information. And yes, I do have several questions. So you have a great list of resources here, and I do want to emphasize what you mentioned about the one-on-one consultation. Definitely. Fortunately, this webinar is being recorded so people can listen to it over and over again, and they have your slides, which have such great information. So let's just jump into a couple of quick questions so we can end on time for everybody. And Kristen has made the generous offer to respond to any further questions that you have via email. So the POLST, um, somebody asked if you could repeat what that stands for, and also how do you get one?
Okay, so the POLST, which stands for Physician's Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, this is actually, so that's a medical directive. So you need to speak with your doctor. Usually they print it on, I think in Virginia, it's a sheet of paper. It's very vibrant, but it's intended for people who are really in that fragile state. So they're already having discussions regarding end of life care. So if your loved one is in good health, aside from just growing older, it really would not be an appropriate document to have the doctor sign. But if there is an extenuating health condition, which is, putting your loved one on that downward trend, certainly speaking with the physician to have it signed by the doctor would be the way to go. But
So
speaking,
that, yeah, go ahead.
no, it's okay. Going to the doctor to discuss the options together, and the doctor must sign it. So that's what's making it a medical directive.
Hmm. And another form that comes up is the do not resuscitate. So it's actually kind of three things now we're talking about health related to healthcare. It's the medical healthcare power of attorney, and
Mhm.
then the POLST as needed, and a DNR, do not resuscitate, if desired.
Yeah, so the difference between the post and more people are familiar with the DNR, and that's the more standard document that people tend to have in their homes. But the Pulse gives a little bit more information. So it's letting you say in a little more detail what types of treatments you want and to what extent you want these different treatments.
Okay. And this will be our last question. And again, if you're on and listening, you can reach out with your individual questions. You can re-listen to this webinar, review the slides. And also, I did want to say, if there is some particular issue like the self-care things that Kristen mentioned, that we did not have a chance to go into in depth today, that you would like to hear more about, when you sign off, there'll be a survey, and there's a question there on which topics would be of interest to you. So you can certainly write your ideas for things like that in there. And we may be able to do a webinar on more in depth on one of the things that Kristen so eloquently spoke about today. So our final question is, my mom is caring for my dad who has dementia. Should she get a durable power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney, or are these not necessary since she is the spouse?
So in the state of Virginia, in regards to healthcare, there does not have to be a power of attorney for healthcare. Legally, it would go to your mom as next of kin to your dad. In regards to the power of attorney in terms of the finances and other legal decisions, it's going to depend at this point what state your dad is in terms of your dad being able to understand what he's signing. So if it's past the point where your dad is able to understand that, okay, I'm giving my wife permission to make these decisions for me, um, then it may be a situation of guardianship. But if your dad's in the earlier stages of the disease and he's able to understand that I'm giving my wife permission, um, then a attorney might be willing to drop the paperwork for a durable power of attorney.
Hmm. Well, that's interesting about the healthcare power of attorney
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
the state of Virginia.
Yeah.
Wow.
Virginia's, yeah, the next of kin state.
Wow. Okay. Well, Kristen, I want to say thank you very much for sharing all of this great information with us, and thank everybody for joining us. This is our final webinar of 2019. We are planning the 2020 webinar series, and so please, as you exit, fill out the survey. That's great information for us. And let us know if there are any topics that you would specifically like us to address. And um, thank you once again, Kristen and everyone. And we'll hope to see you in the future.